Hi, everybody. So today I want to talk about stereotypes related to Asperger syndrome. And I'm only going to cover a few things because, this is a subject that could go on forever if I allowed it to. So I'm going to start off first by saying that I've been thinking about it because I recently decided to join an Asperger's group in our community. We go to movies, have meetings where we get to know everybody, that kind of stuff. And one of the things we're doing right now is reading the Rosie Project for our next meeting. And this book is it's like a community read. People all over Dayton, Ohio are reading this book, like the library's involved and all that stuff. But I've only read to about 70 pages into the book. But I'm already kind of annoyed just at the frequent stereotypes that I feel kind of are represented in this. So far it's about a guy who, it's pretty obvious he probably has Asperger's or something like that, and yet he doesn't realize he has it. I mean, he even taught like a lecture on it, and he still didn't realize that he himself probably had it. And that annoyed me first off because I've heard that before, the whole everybody around knows that somebody has something except for that person. And to me, that's kind of annoying. First of all, it makes us look like we're stupid. Like we can't figure out that we have the symptoms to something and that, we may have it even if we know a lot about that subject. And also, it's just, I don't know, it's almost kind of like, everybody's laughing at the person, with Asperger's kind of thing, and that bothers me. And the truth is, I've known a lot of people who have Asperger syndrome, and especially those who were diagnosed later in life. A lot of them, once they heard about Asperger syndrome and they knew what the qualities were and everything, they saw themselves in it. In fact, a lot of people, especially older people, they actually think they have Asperger syndrome before they get the diagnosis. So they have read up on it or whatever, and they see themselves in the qualities, and they mention it to their doctor, and then they may go do testing or whatever and find out that they do have it or that they don't have it. But it annoys me that people seem to think people with Asperger's just don't realize that they have Asperger's symptoms, and that's stupid because we do. And then another thing that kind of annoyed me is I don't want to say this the wrong way, but it's another science savant kind of Aspergian Aspie character in this book, and there's nothing wrong with that. Don't get me wrong. There are Aspies who are incredibly gifted in science and technology and things like that, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I think that's great. But unfortunately, that's become kind of the stereotype, and everybody thinks if you have Asperger's, you're automatically some scientific genius or IT tech wizard or something. And that is not true. In fact, a lot of the Aspies that I know are actually more gifted in creative ways. I mean, I know lots of Aspies who are writers or poets or painters or musicians. It just tends to be whatever your passion is. A lot of times you either have a strong natural ability for that, or you're so obsessed with it that you kind of become gifted at it. And writing and art for me are kind of two natural talents that I have. I've always been a good writer, and I've not always been a good artist because when I was in elementary school, they wanted me to make art their way, and I didn't do that well. But when I finally was able to make art my way, then I found that I had a lot of hidden abilities in that area. So that's another thing is I think some Aspies don't even realize their talents because the world tries to force them into a role or a way of doing things that isn't comfortable for them. I had such a struggle with algebra, not because I didn't understand it, but because the way I solved the problems was not the way the teacher said I had to solve the problems, and I was always getting in trouble for using other methods, and I would get the right answer all the time, so obviously my methods worked, but they weren't, the step-by-step that she wanted us to do, so I had a lot of trouble with that. And it's kind of the same thing with art. I do it my way, and if I try to do other people's way, it turns out really, really bad. So that's kind of what I think. I mean, you can be an Aspie and be talented in anything. And you don't necessarily have to be some savant, like, genius kind of person. Although a lot of people think that, every Aspie has to have some kind of genius ability. That's not necessarily true. I mean, I think every human being has talents in one way or another, and Aspies are no different than that. We have talents in, different areas, and some areas can be, you know, even if we're not naturally talented, we can become kind of talented. Like, I am a horrible athlete. I'm very uncoordinated, but when I was a kid, I became obsessed with gymnastics, and in a very short amount of time, I was able to move from like the lowest gymnastics class to the highest gymnastics class where I was taking classes because I was just so obsessed with it, and I did it for like at least 6 to 8 hours a day probably. So we have that ability to become really incredible at something just because we love it so much and we obsess over it. And we do have some natural ability sometimes too. But those are the two stereotypes that so far in this book are kind of annoying me. And I thought I'd just share my feelings. And like I said, I know there are other stereotypes. I mean, there's stereotypes, for guy Aspies, there's stereotypes for girl Aspies, there's, stereotypes just for the overall, Asperger Syndrome diagnosis or whatever. But I really wish people would just, stop with the stereotypes, just let everybody be an individual. And, I think that would be great. So that's all I really got to say about the stereotypes today. But if you have anything to say, feel free to share it below. Thumbs up if you like the video, and consider subscribing if you'd like to hear more. So I'd really love to hear any other Aspies, kind of their feelings on this whole stereotype issue. So if you have something to say, please comment, because I'd love to read it. And that's it for today. So bye-bye.